Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. So this video I've been trying to make for 2 days now. It's a fantastic video. I was so excited when it came out. Beck basically lays out a 10x case for Rocket Lab, and we always know he's conservative, right? And he speaks, it's a very new video. It's in New Zealandish, so it's the best interview we've ever seen yet, and you're going to get it. I love that accent, by the way. So I was just very sick, and despite I was sick, I did the video. I had a huge headache throughout the video. It was a 30-minute video, and then it didn't save, or I don't know what happened. It was a technical issue, so I just went to sleep, and I slept, and I'm back. I'm healthy now, so I'm ready to reshoot this video. It's going to be amazing. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and let's look at the video now.
Company to survive.
It's Tuesday, the 24th of October.
Okay, guys,
Rocket
here we
Lab
go.
is chasing more mass to orbit with its biggest mission yet. Beck tells me what opportunities and challenges are still to come in the space economy.
I think the biggest thing to happen in space has not yet happened. Whoever can put the services in space and maintain them and deliver service from space at the fastest rate, at the lowest cost, is going to win. You know, my two competitors are the two richest people on the planet. It's do or die. Like you have to build a profitable company to survive.
It's Tuesday, the 24th of October, and you're watching Markets with Madison. New industries are emerging as space becomes more open for business. NASDAQ-listed Rocket Lab is undertaking its biggest mission yet, building a heavier rocket to put it on the path to competing with Elon Musk's SpaceX and Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin. They're all chasing mass to orbit and what's forecast to be a $2 trillion space economy. In this episode, I'll give you an inside look into how Rocket Lab is upping its own stakes in the space race. Rocket Lab's Mission Operations and Control Centre in Auckland is top secret. It's where its Electron rockets are made, and some components of its soon-to-be bigger Neutron rocket are under development. For that reason, there's a lot we can't show you. But the Chief Executive, Beck, gives a good sense of the speed of innovation in space. He has to be this fast when he's going up against Elon Musk. Rocket Lab has launched 39 times, while Musk's SpaceX has launched its heavier Falcon rockets 273 times. Its most recent launch dropped 22 Starlink satellites into orbit. That number is expected to boom in the next few years, with more providers getting into satellite broadband, including Amazon, which just launched aboard a ULA rocket. It highlights an industry that's expanding beyond building and launching rockets. With new industries emerging, who will dominate the space economy? In this interview with Beck, he reveals what role Rocket Lab is going to play, and the challenges his company and the whole industry still need to overcome to get there. Beck, thank you so much for your time. It's amazing to be here. Thanks for having us in.
My pleasure.
Now, we're going to talk about the space economy more broadly, but I do just want to start on more recent news. You recently sold, what, 3.6 million shares? Why are you selling?
Well, it's really for some estate planning purposes, and you know, I've started a foundation called the Beck Foundation. We're doing some cool stuff, and I've always had a real passion to support New Zealand entrepreneurs, and I think I've maybe 35 companies and counting now. So the foundation is another way to support other more interesting things.
So I'm very happy that he got asked this question, and to be honest, guys, I have run my real estate startup since soon 10 years, and you know, it's tough in the real estate business. I'm not going to lie about it. And I almost came to face, like what would happen if my company would go bankrupt? And I would we would be completely effed in the family because I haven't taken any chips off the table, you know? Beck has been running Rocket Lab since 2006. And I have 100% understanding that after all these achievements, he wants to take a little bit off for estate planning purposes, but it's just a tiny part. So I think it's a complete non-issue, and I'm really happy that it's almost like she's a retail investor and wanted to know the answer for this.
Your head is still in Rocket Lab, though?
Oh my God, yes, yeah. No, it represents, like, I think it's a fraction over 6% of my total holdings. Yeah, no, it's a small piece to take off the table.
Good to hear. I didn't doubt it for a second. You're going for accessibility with Electron. You're now chasing, more mass to orbit with your bigger rocket Neutron. Why is bigger better now?
So Electron fills a really important market niche, and that market niche is growing, and the product's going really well, and all the rest of it. So that's great. But there's also another market niche that we can go after. And for the longest time, I said I was never going to build a bigger rocket, never going to build a bigger rocket. In fact, you can probably find an interview somewhere where I said I was going to tattoo it across my forehead. I was that resolute that we were
I imagine you've defected on that now. You're not actually going to tattoo it. Okay, good.
No, well, I ate the hat to absolve myself from that sin. But nevertheless, it's become really obvious to us that there was a place for us to play. And one of our competitors become really dominant in that kind of medium
SpaceX.
And a monopoly is never a great thing to have in any market. So we felt that we could actually go after that opportunity, and we thought we could be really successful in it. And we'd kind of built all the pieces, like Electron, it's kind of semi-reusable, so we learned a lot of lessons about reusability, and that sort of gave us a lot of confidence to go after a reusable large launch vehicle.
Does that effectively mean that you feel like you've democratized access to space with smaller spacecraft now, so that you feel like you can move on?
Unquestionably. So before Electron came along, the cheapest flight you could buy was literally like somewhere between 30 and 50 million US dollars. That if you had a small dedicated payload that you wanted to get to orbit, there was the Minotaur or the Pegasus launch vehicle, 30 to 45 million dollars, thereabouts. And we took that down to 7.5. So, it enabled a whole new kind of, place within the market, and enabled a whole bunch of really cool missions. So definitely that box is ticked. We'll continue to scale that product, and it's all good. But it's time to move on to something that's bigger and a bigger opportunity.
And why is now a time to chase mass to orbit? Because frequency and reliability still aren't completely perfect. And dare I bring it up, you lost a satellite recently. So why are you still going bigger when nothing's perfect here?
Well, nothing is ever perfect in this game. Like it's an absolute assault on physics. 2% of everything that weighs in the rocket is actually the satellite you put in orbit. So you need a fraction of a percent out on anything, and you don't get to orbit. So it's always massively difficult. Electron's reliability, to your point, like we had a recent failure, which is devastating. But its reliability is still extraordinary, especially amongst small launch vehicles. It is just demonstrably better than any other small launch vehicle. So that being said, you can't let that stop. You developing new products and moving on. The larger launch vehicle is servicing a really important part of the market, and it opens the market up for us for doing much larger things as well.
How big is that market? I've seen lots of numbers thrown around. What do you price it at?
Yeah, well, the launch market is somewhere between a $10 and $20 billion TAM. So that in itself is, when you compare it to the whole space market, the whole space economy is worth about $360 billion.
US?
US, yeah. But that's predicted to go to somewhere between 1 and 2 trillion by 2030, depending on which banker's report you want to read. So there's no argument that the space industry is in a massive growth phase. And Neutron really puts us in an ability to take a big chunk of that market. But it's not really the $10 billion launch TAM that we're going after with Neutron. Rocket Lab is not about a rocket. It's not about a satellite. It's about combining those two things together to go after a much bigger opportunity. And that's kind of the important thing here. Is like the rocket is the enabler. It's not the end point.
I do want to talk.
So interesting that he brings this point up, because even retail investors, I was watching a retail investor presenting Rocket Lab and the valuation of Rocket Lab, and he was literally going like, they will have this many launches, and next year this many launches, and the year after this many launches, and if the launches cost this much and the gross margin is this much. And Rocket Lab is not trying to be a launch company. And just as he said, the TAM of the launch is maybe 20 billion, but the space TAM is 300 billion. So that means that 200, like 90+% of the space industry is not in the rockets. But when you're able to produce satellites, when you're able to produce rockets very cheaply, they're reusable, then it really enables you to create something extraordinary, like Starlink. And Starlink has added 100 billion to SpaceX's valuation. So if Rocket Lab comes up with something, we don't know what that is. I highly doubt it's going to be broadband internet. I think it's more like space manufacturing, something of this sort. It can really add tens of billions to the valuation of Rocket Lab, and the current valuation is 2 billion.
About being an end-to-end space company and your place in that sort of future. But while we're still talking about finances, do I want to ask you about unit economics? Building a new, much bigger rocket is very expensive.
Yep.
Cost control, though, really determines survivability in this game, as it does in many games.
Yep.
How do you think about the unit economics? And you've already mentioned reusability, but how important is reusability in that piece?
I mean, reusability is a big important element. So even on Electron, 70% of the total cost of the rocket is in that first stage that we go and recover. So Neutron is even better than that in some respects, because it's designed from day one to be a reusable rocket, not kind of appended with stuff like we had to do with Electron. So the unit economics from that standpoint is really, really important. And it's also important to understand, like, a small rocket is the hardest rocket to make work, and the hardest rocket to make work, you know, both financially and also like you know, from an engineering perspective.
What he's going to explain here is crucial to understand as a Rocket Lab investor. It's really crucial.
So low margins everywhere. And the reason why it's difficult is, like, a launch range doesn't care, a safety team doesn't care if the rocket is 1 meter diameter or 10 meters in diameter. Same amount of people. So you have to amortize all of those functions across a $7.5 million sticker price. So it's so much harder to make all that close and make margin. Whereas if you go to Neutron, you know, it's a $50 million+ sticker price. It's the same size team. And the reason why I think we're going to be really, really competitive here is because we've had to come up with really clever ways to take a 50-person flight safety team into a 5-person flight safety team. And when you apply that to like Neutron, it's a huge amount of saving.
What's the margin difference on an Electron rocket versus what will be on a Neutron?
Well, we're aiming for 50% gross margin on both products.
But obviously higher price, the margin's bigger, 50%
totally.
on a more expensive
Yep.
rocket.
Yep.
Okay. How low can that cost go? Because if you look at everything that combines that cost, it's fuel, materials, as you mentioned, the team, and maybe a bit of maintenance on the ground and on the rocket as it comes back down. But at what point does a spacecraft become like an aircraft and it comes back down, you turn it around at a cheap cost and get it back up?
Well, I mean, that's utopia, right? That's what everybody wishes for.
That's what you're aiming for, isn't it?
Yeah, it is what everybody aims for. Unfortunately, the reality of physics is a real pain in the butt. Like, as I mentioned before, 2% of the total rocket's mass is the payload. And it's even worse than that when you make a vehicle reusable, because you're carrying all that extra parasitic mass. So, you know, as much as everybody wants like an aircraft-like operations, there needs to be some pretty amazing breakthroughs in propulsion or materials or something major to really make that a reality. I mean, we're all kind of having a crack at it, and it's all suboptimum. But you know, to truly make an aircraft-like operation, there has to be some breakthrough somewhere, because the physics is just fighting you the whole way. Like, if the Earth's mass was just a little bit heavier, we wouldn't get anything to space. It would just be physically impossible.
Do you think it is possible to make spacecraft like aircraft eventually?
Eventually, I think it is. But like I say, there's going to have to be some pretty substantial breakthroughs.
Speaking of spacecraft and becoming like aircraft, Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Jeff Bezos has already gone to space. Why are you not getting into space tourism?
I'm not convinced of the market. And I think you can look at Virgin Galactic, and you know, they're now operational, and it's like not a great business. I think there's plenty of people that would love to, you know, to take the ticket, but I still think that market is very unproven and not that large. And I don't think this is forever. You know, I'm often asked about, you know, human spaceflight, and when is Rocket Lab going to put a capsule on the top of Neutron? And the answer to that question is kind of exactly the same answer to this question. It's like, when there is a market, like when there is a destination. At the moment, there's one customer for orbital space travel, and that's NASA. Until there's many, many more customers, then it's a really difficult kind of business to square in my eyes.
So fair to say, ruling out space tourism for now, Rocket Lab's not going to
Well,
get into
I've
it?
had to eat a hat because I ruled stuff out, so I'm not going to rule anything out.
Never say never?
Never say never, but it's certainly not a market we're like pursuing at the moment.
I love his thinking as a CEO, because we need somebody at the helm who, you know, he will also explain this in a bit, who's very prudent. He knows where the company has to go, because imagine if you, a space company, you go after a market like Astra, for example, that you start producing certain kind of rockets and you build a factory and it turns out that it's wrong. It's like you jumped off a cliff and you can't turn back. And you can really see that he's like, okay, if we build this, do we have customers? Can we sell it? And I really like seeing it. And he's like, yeah, there's only one customer and one destination, which is the ISS, and the NASA is sending up people, and until there's more, we're not really interested in it. Really, really like it.
I think you know, space tourism to orbit when there is a destination. If someone goes and puts a giant hotel up there and like there's actually a real destination other than what NASA needs, then sure. But I think the market needs to develop a bit.
If we look at what's happening in the market now, you know this, but just to bring it up, we're mostly sending satellites for communications, a bit of defence up to orbit. I'd love your thoughts on other industries that are emerging out of the so-called space economy, as I call it. You've recently worked with VADA to help manufacture pharmaceuticals in space, which is incredibly interesting. What other opportunities like that do you see as space becomes more open for business?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I'll preface that with, I think the biggest thing to happen in space has not yet happened. I think we're kind of at that time when, you know, if you think about the marine industry, there's a few ships going out and exploring, and there's not like a full-on, you know, Maersk. There's just a few kind of tentacles in water, if you will. So I think the biggest thing to happen in space is yet to happen, but clearly, you know, communications, there's some things that the high ground of space gives you, and communications is obviously one, Earth observation is another. But I think there's a tremendous amount of really interesting business plans out there, that's for sure. And you mentioned VADA, you know, pharmaceutical is interesting. I think down mass is interesting. So, you know, everyone's focused on getting stuff up, but I think getting stuff down is equally an interesting market.
Is there anything out there that you think doesn't have legs other than space tourism, that you think that's probably not going to work?
I struggle with some of the asteroid mining and stuff like that. Like in situ space resource utilisation makes sense. If I need to land on a rock to fuel up to get to Mars, makes sense. But bringing home platinum from a meteorite back to Earth, I mean, if it was easier to get to orbit, then that would be great. But it's just so incredibly difficult that I kind of struggle with some of those business plans.
You mentioned down mass. What role is Rocket Lab playing in that? Are you active in it?
Yeah, so I mean, VADA is a great example. So, you know, we're responsible for the spacecraft and hosting their capsule, and we're responsible to deorbit that capsule. So that is very difficult trajectory stuff. You know, so we definitely have a hand in that.
Do you see that as a growing part of the business going forward?
Yeah, to be determined. Certainly, you know, one of the reasons why we took that project on is every kind of project that we take on with our customers is always very strategic. It's not always just about, you know, generating revenue. And, you know, one day we're going to put a capsule on top of Neutron, so we have to be able to get that back. So I'd much rather, you know, do all the effort and spend all the time on getting back a little capsule than the first time we ever re-enter something from space that have humans on board.
Are you going to be on board?
Nope.
Me neither, if I say so myself.
No, I have all of the knowledge, but none of the courage.
So just want to say here that, again, we see his pragmatic thinking, that every mission that they take has a strategic decision behind, and he's so smart that they are sending up this capsule. He is not committing that he's going to make this down mass into a new division in Rocket Lab, only if it works. And they're doing it in very small, because he knows that they're going to have capsules on Neutron, and it's better to test small and be ready when Neutron is ready. So really like the thinking.
And I do want to talk about one day, and I think this is what investors would love to hear from you. What does Rocket Lab's role in that one-day space economy look like? You call yourself an end-to-end space company now. There's all of these things being thrown out there: down mass, space tourism, pharmaceuticals. How will Rocket Lab look in that bigger space economy in the future?
This is actually really important because I think if you look at the large space companies of the future, it's not going to be a launch company, it's not going to be a satellite company or a down-based company. What it's going to be is a company that is end-to-end. Because everything in space is a giant compromise. Like if you look at a rocket, as an engineer, it drives you literally insane. Because an engineer, you want everything perfect, but everything is a compromise against everything else. Then you go and add a spacecraft on the top, and everything in that spacecraft is a compromise against everything else. And then you put them all together and you've got one giant compromise. So if you can end-to-end all of that and actually just deliver solutions in orbit, you can eliminate so much of the compromise, so much of the bit in the middle, and it starts to get blurry between what is a rocket and what is a spacecraft. And that's when it gets really, really interesting, because at the moment, the industry is very segmented. It's like, I'm a rocket guy, here's my rocket, you make your spacecraft to fit in my rocket. And then the spacecraft guys, here's my spacecraft, you make your rocket, have the environments to suit my spacecraft. And it's very, very segregated. But when you start blurring that together, the power of that is enormous. And I think a good way to not to call out promote any of our competitors, but if you look at what Elon's done with Starlink, is case in point. If you own the spacecraft, you can launch the spacecraft, you can deploy infrastructure at a rate and a frequency and a cost that nobody else can even come close to matching. So Rocket Lab's end goal here is not to be a rocket company, not to be a satellite company, but to ultimately deploy infrastructure in space. Because as we talked about before, the total addressable market in space is 320 billion to $1 trillion. Of that 320 billion, like 300 of it is actually services from space. So whoever can put the services in space and maintain them and deliver service from space at the fastest rate, at the lowest cost, is going to win. And you need your own rocket to do that. And you need to build your own spacecraft to do that. So that's kind of the master plan.
I love it.
I love it. And it's funny, this is like the third time I watched this interview, and this is the first time when the penny 100% dropped, that basically what he's talking about, the people that are going to win in the space industry is people who can sell services. So let's say that the military says, we need eyes in the sky. And then he goes, good, I can deliver that. What's the resolution that you want? And how frequently do you want? And they say, we want to see every 10 centimeters, every 2 hours. And he goes, great, it will be this much per month. And that's a service. Or, Starlink, that you say, we need internet. Yeah, good. Pay $100 a month. Here's an antenna, and you're linked up, and it's up there in space. And or somebody says that, yeah, we need to produce this special carbon fiber, and it needs to be made in zero G. And he says, great, how many kilos do you need? Okay, this is my kilo price. Do you want it? And then he literally designs the whole thing from beginning to end and just sells the service. And it is unannounced. This was what I was talking about, that he names here that the space services is 300 million and the rocket launch is 10 billion. So this is literally where he lays out the 10x case for Rocket Lab, and he doesn't disclose what that is, what's their plan. I mean, he knows that that is the plan, but he's not saying okay, we're doing downmass or we're doing this and it's in 2025. And this makes this a very, very interesting investment, because the people who understand, I think, have a very large unfair upside if you really understand what this means. Of course, you take a lot of risk, but this is why I invested into this company. And yeah, I really like this guy. I don't know if that has been clear before. I really like this guy.
At the moment, Rocket Lab is 1/3 rocket launching and building and 2/3 space systems.
Correct.
How will that ratio change in the future, do you think?
I think it'll be about that. I mean, we sat down when we started to get into space systems, and as part of the strategy said, look, we'd really love to get one day to a point 2/3, 1/3. And that might sort of take us 5 years. Well, we did it in the first year and a half. So we really like that kind of ratio. Launch is super lumpy. Spacecraft are built over sometimes years, so it smooths the whole kind of business model out.
You've already raised some challenges, and the challenges of physics. We're casually sitting here about launching things into space, which is kind of not really a casual conversation by any measure. In Elon Musk's own words, this is, quote, f***ing hard. Virgin Orbit has failed. You got some of their assets for cheap, so
Yep.
good on you for getting in on that.
Yep.
What about this industry right now is most challenging? And when you look out to that future that you've just spoken about, what are the challenges that the industry is yet to accept or yet to override?
That's a great question. So I think there's a number of challenges. So space is incredibly capital intensive, and a lot of people ask us, like, does SpaceX and you guys have delivered, a launch vehicle on cadence with reliability? There's really only those two companies that have done it. What is the difference between those two companies and as you point out, the litany of failures and attempts prior? And the space industry, like, it's the best way I can describe it is like running through a maze at night, and at every dead end there's literally, a cliff to fall off. And if you just run flat out and you fall off that cliff, then you're dead. So you've got to run super quickly through the maze, but you can't screw it up. You've got to run quickly, but also stop before you fall off the cliff and realize that you're about to fall off the cliff, turn around and go. So it's just very, very unforgiving in the fact that if you run down the wrong technology path, you're going off a cliff, because the amount of capital you've sunk and time you've sunk, it's almost irreversible to get back out. So it's kind of like make haste very diligently and very, very slowly, if you will. And if I look across, how we develop things and how competitors develop things, there is a difference. And making those judgment calls at the right time is super important. So that being said, not really answering your question, but that being said, like, tremendously capital intensive. So very, very, just like when you go to orbit, there's no room for error. In the business, there's no room for error either. Like, you have to be very, very diligent. And, because it is such a capital intensive business, being ruthlessly capital efficient is also super, super important.
You talk about trying to be diligent while making haste, but the speed of innovation in the so-called space race is immense. What does that require from you as a leader?
That's a difficult question. So, look, I think I'm still the chief engineer of the company, and I really, really love that role. If you put 10 engineers in a room, you'll have probably 6 different ways about doing it, and sometimes somebody has to be the mediator, and that's kind of, if I have one gift out of anything, that's probably it. And so I try and spend as much time, in that part of the business as I do actually, company building and the rest of the business. So yeah, I'm not sure that really answers the question.
Sort of does. Ashley Vance from Bloomberg wrote a book about you recently. You said that at the end of it, he still couldn't figure out who you are and what you're like.
Yeah, I take that as actually a win. That was good. That was the intention. So, yep.
So I'm going to try and figure out who you are here today. I'm just going to ask you to make it a little bit easier on everyone.
Okay.
What do you want investors to know about who you are and what you're doing, what your ambition is?
Look, naturally I'm very passionate about space, and the reason I'm passionate about space is not necessarily because it's cool. I mean, it is cool, and it's deeply challenging from an engineering perspective. I really, really enjoyed really difficult problems. The harder the problem, the faster I'll run towards it. But as you entered the building here, you would have read a quote up on the wall, and whatever factory you go into at Rocket Lab, you'll read the same quote, and that is, we go to space to improve life on Earth. And I think the thing that makes me most excited about what we're building here is that there's very few industries that you can put a relatively small thing in situ to create such a massive impact. Like, we launch a few weather satellites and they literally impact millions of people's lives. And building stuff in space is just no different to building infrastructure. Like, you build a bridge and a road in State Highway 1 and it affects the people that use the bridge and the road in State Highway 1. We can put something in orbit and it affects literally every person in the entire planet in every country if they use that service. So you can have massive amounts of impact. So what really drives me is, I was taught to, when I was growing up, it's like, do something useful and have the biggest impact you can with your life. And, space is cool and all the rest of it, but at the end of the day, I don't know of anything else where you can have as much impact as you can in space. And with impact creates value. Like, and what we're trying to build here as a company, there's a lot of space companies that are just, they're all wound up about being cool in space and all the rest of it. What I'm trying to build here is like a multi-generational space company that goes on to deliver impact. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why I took it public. because if you look at a lot of space companies, you know, my two competitors are the two richest people on the planet. And you have to ask yourself, when they go, are their companies going to continue? Are they going to continue to, you know, to grow and thrive? And maybe they will, maybe they won't. But going public almost enforces that. It's do or die. Like you have to build a profitable company to survive. And if you build a profitable company, it will survive, and it can go on to be multi-generational. To me, the biggest failure would be if I built Rocket Lab and then retired or died, and then it stopped. Like that's.
I love so much what he's saying here, because I'm a very, very long-term investor, and for me, the longer I can hold a company, the sexier it is. Basically, like, the reason why I don't like PayPal is because, yes, I agree that it's cheap, but if you buy it this cheap, then the market will reprice it, and then it will just be a very boring, slow growth, mature company, right? You can hate me in the comments. But this company, he's actually trying to build something that is going to last generations and generations. It has a huge TAM. It has a huge opportunity. And he's so right that the other two guys, Musk and Bezos, if Bezos would be gone tomorrow, I think that Blue Origin would not function, because there is nobody who's going to bankroll that company. I don't think they had any launches or meaningful income. SpaceX is a little bit of another animal, but here you can also see that Musk is not really profit oriented. He's mission focused, and it's a philanthropic mission of trying to get to Mars. And yes, he's very smart, because basically Starlink is going to be used to, you know, fund the Mars mission, which doesn't really have a way to get income. It's just fulfilling the mission, and Musk hopes that the money will be there when it's done. Whereas Rocket Lab is the only one of these space companies that is actually trying to be profitable, very, very, you know, business minded. And I think it's such an opportunity that we get to invest in this company, because there's no way to buy SpaceX stocks, there's no way to buy Blue Origin stocks, and I wouldn't even want to touch Blue Origin with a 10-foot pole. So I think it's so nice that he took this company public and gave us the opportunity to invest into this. And I really have I told you guys how much I like this guy? He's a really cool guy.
That would be, you know, failure for everybody. So one of the whole reasons to go public was to enforce that discipline, to enforce that you know, that company building, to make sure that we have something that is enduring.
Can Rocket Lab survive without you?
Yes, totally. Yeah.
I don't believe that at the current
stage. I would have failed. I have to say that, because I would completely fail if that was the case. You know, right now it requires plenty of nurturing.
Exactly.
But, you know, we have a really, really laser clear trajectory of where we need to go, and we've just got to crash through a few things and pull a few things off, and it'll be just great.
Is the opportunity for impact infinite? We call it a space race, but is there space for all of you, for Rocket Lab, SpaceX, Blue Origin,
yep.
ULA? Is there space for all of you in the race?
I think so. I think the market is big enough. Like, the opportunity is big enough, and we're all chasing different things. Like, you know, Elon's going to Mars. Great.
You're not?
Not going to Mars, no. Oh, ironically, we have 2 spacecraft going to Mars, but certainly I have no intention to leave a footprint on Mars. And you know, Jeff is about building huge amounts of infrastructure off Earth, so building Earth off Earth. I guess we're a little bit more strategic about that, and we have to build a profitable business first. And you know, we think there's plenty of opportunities along the way to do really, really cool stuff, but also that build, you know, that foundation for an enduring business.
Thank you so much for your time, Peter. It's been amazing to chat.
My pleasure.
Easily the coolest place.
Fantastic interview. I hope the commentary wasn't too much. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. It's earning soon, Q3 earnings. Very, very excited. And yeah, thanks again for watching. See you guys in the next video. Ciao, ciao.